Good evening, everyone. I will start by giving a brief introduction to myself. I am Dr. Malika Gautam. I am an advocate in the Supreme Court of India and I am a regular counsel at the International Court of Justice. Um, I am very grateful to the virtual lawyer for hosting me and having this venture, which can cause all of you and myself to learn. Uh, I think it is very important that we keep learning, especially in these times, because the quarantine has led us to be very inactive. But yes, this is a very ongoing topic, and therefore I will start by firstly giving you a brief introduction to what alternate dispute resolution or ADR actually is. So, to mean what it is basically a method to resolve disputes without litigation. Some people in layman terms call it out of court settlements and stuff like that, but we use a better terminology and we call it basically an alternate form of dispute resolution. Public courts are often asked to review the validity of the ADR methods, but this is very rare if a public court would overturn the ADR decision or the awards that have been granted in the ADR methods. Now, arbitration and mediations are basically two major forms of alternate dispute resolutions. And alternate dispute resolution or ADR would mean any means of settling disputes outside of the courtroom. It typically includes early neutral evaluation, negotiation, conciliation, mediation, and arbitration. As increasing court queues, rising costs of litigation, and time delays continue to plague litigants, more states have begun experimenting with ADR programs. Some of these programs are voluntary and other programs are mandatory. While two most common forms of ADR are arbitration and mediation, negotiation is most always attempted first to resolve a dispute. It is the preeminent mode of dispute resolution. Negotiation allows the parties to meet in order to settle a dispute. The main advantage of this form of dispute settlement is that it allows the parties themselves to control the process as well as the solution. ADR is not immune from any sort of criticism. It is very prone to criticism, I would say. Some say that it is a waste of time. Others recognize the risk that it may only be initiated to check what is the minimum offer that other parties would accept. The delay in disposal of cases and the law courts, for whatever reason it may be, has really defeated the purpose for which the people approach the courts for their redressal. In many parts of India, rapid development has meant increased caseloads for already overburdened courts, further leading to notoriously slow adjudication. As a result, alternate dispute resolution mechanisms have become more crucial for businesses operating in India and those doing businesses with Indian firms. Alternate dispute resolution, herein referred as ADR, is a necessary substitute to existing methods of dispute resolution such as litigation, dispute, conflict, violence, and physical fights or rough handling of situations. It is a movement with a drive from evolving positive approach and attitude towards resolving a dispute. In the subsequent part of these webinars, we will be discussing the evolution of ADR in the present scenario and in the Indian context. It is very important to understand that alternate dispute resolution is not something new and has been around in our countries for centuries. In India, the law and practice of private transactional commercial disputes without court intervention can be dated back to ancient times. Arbitration or mediation as an alternate to dispute resolution by municipal courts has been prevalent in India from the Vedic times. The earliest known treatise is the Bhadranayak Upanishad, in which various types of arbitral bodies vis-a-vis the Puga or the Shrenis, they were often referred to, even Kulas were referred to. Now, these arbitral bodies are known as panchayats in the layman term. They dealt with a variety of disputes, such as disputes of contractual, matrimonial, and even of a criminal nature. The disputants would ordinarily accept the decision of the panchayat, and hence a settlement was arrived consequent to the conciliation by the panchayat, and it would be as binding as the decision that was on clear legal obligations. The Muslim rule in India saw the incorporation of principles of Muslim law in the Indian culture. Those laws were systematically compiled in the form of a commentary which came to be known as a Hidayah. During Muslim rule, all Muslims in India were governed by the Islamic laws, the Sharias, as contained in the Hidayah. The Hidayah contains provisions for arbitration as well. The Arabic word for arbitration is basically called tehkeem, while the word for an arbitrator was hakam or hakam, depending upon how you pronounce it. An arbitrator was required to possess the qualities essential for a qazi, who was the official judge who used to preside over a court of law. His decision was usually binding on the parties, and it was subject to the legalities and the validity of the award. The court has the jurisdiction to enforce such awards given under the Sharia, though it is not entitled to review the merits of the dispute or the reasoning of the arbitrator. ADR picked up pace in the country with the coming up of East India Company. The British government gave legislative form to the law of arbitration by promulgating regulations in 3 presidencies, which were Calcutta, Bombay and Madras. The Bengal Resolution Act in 1772 and the Bengal Regulation Act in 1781 provided the parties to submit the dispute to an arbitrator. And this arbitrator was usually appointed by the mutual decision and the agreement of both the parties. Now, because it was a mutual decision, it was also important that this verdict had to be binding on both the parties, since both the parties decided that this is how an arbitrator shall be appointed. Now, these remained in force till the Civil Procedure Code came in the 1859, and it was extended in 1862 to the presidency towns. Thus, as pointed out above, the alternate dispute resolution system is not a new experience for the people of this country also. It has been prevalent in India since time immemorial. Legal history indicates that down the ages, man has been experimenting with the procedure for making it easy, cheap, unfailing and convenient to obtain justice. Procedure for justice is indicative of the social consciousness of the people of the country. The Gupta Empire had a separate and distinct judicial system. At the lowest level of the judicial system, there was the village assembly or trade guild. These were the councils which were appointed to settle the disputes between the parties that would appear before these so-called councils. There were separate councils appointed to decide various matters that came before them. Thus, if people could not reach any amicable settlement, it was obviously resolved by the councils. Now, during the Mughal dynasty, most villagers resolved their cases in the village courts itself. An appeal was made to the caste courts. The arbitration of an impartial umpire was a solace who would be a resort by force. The Maratha Empire established panchayats, and they were the first instrument of civil administration of justice under the Marathas to adjudicate cases of simple and minor nature. The disputing parties were to sign an agreement regarding the abiding of the rules and regulations of the panchayat. It was up to the panchayat to study the case and pass its judgment impartially or without any bias to any party. A mamlatdar, a higher officer in the succession of the judicial administration, had to confirm the judgment that was passed. Generally, the mamlatdaran, the panchayat, used to adjudicate the cases which were upheld by the Maratha government. With the advent of the British Raj, these traditional institution of dispute resolution somehow started withering, and the formal legal system introduced by the British began to roll. Alternate dispute resolution in the present form picked up pace in the country. With its creation by the Bengal Regulations, the Bengal Regulations were designed to encourage arbitration. After several regulations containing provisions relating to the Arbitration Act 8 of 1857 codified the procedure for the civil courts, except those established by the Royal Charter. These contained the sections dealing with arbitration in suits as well as sections which provided for the arbitration without intervention of the court. Thereafter, the Indian Arbitration Act of 1899 was passed, which was based on the English Act of the same name. It was the first substantive law on the subject of arbitration, but its application was limited to presidency, and the presidency, as we discussed earlier, included towns such as Calcutta, Bombay and Madras. In 1908, the Code of Civil Procedure was reenacted. The Code made no substantial changes in the law of arbitration, and the Arbitration Act of 1940 was enacted, replacing the Indian Arbitration Act of 1899. And certain parts of the Civil Procedure Code 1908, it amended and consolidated the law relating to the arbitration in British India. It also remained a comprehensive law on arbitration even in the Republic India in 1996. Further, bodies such as the village panchayat, a group of elders and influential persons in a village deciding a dispute between villagers, are not uncommon even today. So we've read several times in our civics books in schools and in political science books in schools, as well as on a higher level, that the panchayats often are a cause or a place where people can settle their disputes, and they can talk without involving the courts and other form of judicial bodies. Now, the panchayat has in the recent past also been involved in caste disputes. In 1982, settlement of disputes out of court started through Lok Adalats. The first Lok Adalat was held on March 14, 1982 at Junagadh in Gujarat, and now it has been extended all throughout the country. Initially, Lok Adalats functioned as a voluntary and conciliatory agency, and it was without any statutory backing for any of its decisions. By the enactment of the Legal Services Authorities Act in 1987, the institution of Lok Adalats had received a statutory status. To keep pace with the globalization of commercial, the old Arbitration Act of 1940 was replaced by the new Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 1996. Settlement of matters concerning the family have been provided under the amendment of Code of Civil Procedure 1976. Provisions are made under the Special Marriage Act 1954 and the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 for making the efforts to reconcile. Under the Family Court Act of 1984, it is the duty of a family court to make efforts for settlements between the parties. Introduction of Section 89 by the way of the 99 Amendment in the Code of Civil Procedure 1908 was a radical advancement made by the Indian legislature. It basically embraced the system of court-referred alternate dispute resolutions. Now, let's talk about the legislations in the ADR which happened in India. Now, Code of Civil Procedure in 1859 and its sections 312, 325 dealt with arbitration and its suits, while sections 326 and 327 provided for the arbitration without court intervention. The Code for Civil Procedure, Act 5, 1908, repealed the Act of 1882. The Code of Civil Procedure 1908 has laid down that cases may be encouraged to go in for ADR under Section 89(1) under the first schedule order 32A, Rule 3, is a duty cast upon the courts that it shall make an endeavour to assist the parties in the first instance in arriving at a settlement in respect of the subject matter of the suit. The second schedule related to arbitration in suits, while briefly providing arbitration without intervention of a court, Order 1, Rule 1 of the schedule says that where in any suit all the parties agree that that any matter in difference between them shall be referred to arbitration, they may, at any time before judgment is pronounced, apply to the court for an order of reference. This schedule, in a way, supplemented the provisions of the Arbitration Act of 1899. Now, let us talk about how the Indian Arbitration Act of 1899 come about. This act was substantially based on the British Arbitration Act of 1889. It expanded the area of arbitration and it defined the expression of submission, which meant a written argument or an agreement to submit present and future differences to arbitration, whether an arbitrator is named therein or not. Arbitration Protocol and Convention Act of 1937 is also important to be mentioned. The Geneva Protocol on Arbitration Clauses, which came about in 1923, and the Geneva Convention on the Execution of Foreign Arbitral Award 1927 were implemented in India by the Arbitration Protocol and Convention Act 1937. This act was enacted with the objective of giving effect to the protocol in enabling the convention to become operative in India. Then came about the Arbitration Act of 1940. This dealt with only domestic arbitration under the 1940 Act and the intervention of the court was required in all the three stages of the arbitration in the tribunal, which was prior to the reference of the dispute, in the duration of the proceedings, and after the award was passed. This act made provisions for a few things. First was the arbitration without court intervention. Second was arbitration in suits, which was arbitration with court intervention, and arbitration with court intervention where cases where there was no civil suit pending before the court. So there are two ways in which it was decided. Now, before an arbitral tribunal took cognizance of a dispute, court intervention was required to set up the arbitration proceedings. The existence of an agreement and the was required to be proved. During the course of the proceedings, the intervention of the court was necessary for the extension of an award. Finally, before the award could be enforced, it was required to be made the rule of the court. This act did not fulfill the extent of ADR. The extent of judicial interference under the act defeated its very purpose. It did not provide a speedy, effective and transparent mechanism to address the disputes arising out of the foreign trade and investment transactions. Now, coming to the latest act, not the latest actually, but next to the latest, Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 1996. Now, the government enacted the Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 1996 in an effort to modernize the 1940 Act. In India, the model law has been adopted almost in its entirety in the 1996 Act. The changes brought about by the 1996 Act were so drastic that the entire case law was built upon the 56 years of arbitration, which was rendered superfluous. Unfortunately, there was no widespread debate and understanding of the changes before such an important legislative change was enacted. The Government of India enacted the 1996 Act by an ordinance, and then it extended its life by another ordinance before the Parliament could eventually actually pass the reference, and there needed to be a reference to the Parliamentary Committee as well. Now, arbitration as practiced in India. Instead of shortening the lifespan of the dispute resolution, it became more of an inning to a game. This is a cricket metaphor. Not only that, but the arbitrators and the parties, including the lawyers, treated the arbitration as an extra time or an overtime, which could help them work while the courts could decide the matters that were pending before them. Now, the result was that the normal session of an arbitration hearing was always for a short duration. Absence of a full-fledged arbitration bar effectively prevented the arbitrations being heard continuously from a day-to-day basis over the normal working hours, vis-a-vis 4 to 5 hours per day. Now, this resulted in the elongation of the period for disposal of the cases before the arbitral tribunal. It was also said in the ADR Congress held in the year 2010 that the 1996 Act, although modelled along international standards, has so far proved to be insufficient in meeting the needs of the business community. And that was said because there was no speedy or impartial resolution to the disputes in India. The Law Commission of India prepared a report on the experience of the 1996 Act and suggested a number of amendments. Based on the recommendations of the Commission, the Government of India introduced the Arbitration and Conciliation Amendment Bill in 2003. The Standing Committee for Law Ministry felt that the provisions of the bill gave room for excessive intervention by the courts in the arbitration proceedings. Modes and practices of ADR in this country. ADR can be broadly classified into two categories. One is court annexed, which is mediation and conciliation, and the other one could be community based, which was Lok Adalats. Now there are a few modes to ADR which are practiced in India, and a few of them are arbitration, mediation, conciliation, negotiation, Lok Adalats, and then of course there are dispute review boards. A lot of you might not know about dispute review boards, but they were very popular. In fact, my father was the first lawyer in this country to actually do the dispute review board cases. Now let's first start with arbitration. Now definition of arbitration in section 2(1) verbatim reproduces the text of article 2A of the model law arbitration. Arbitration means any arbitration, whether or not administered by a permanent arbitral institution. It is a procedure in which the dispute is submitted to an arbitral tribunal which makes a decision or an award on the dispute that is binding upon both the parties. It is a private, generally informal and non-judicial trial procedure for adjudicating disputes. There are four requirements of the concept of arbitration: an arbitration agreement, a dispute, a reference to the third party for its determination, and an award by the third party. The essence lies in the point that it is a forum chosen by the parties with an intention that it must act judicially after taking into account relevant evidence before it and the submission of the parties that have been made. Hence, it follows that if a forum chosen is not required to act judicially, the process is not arbitration. Now, there are a few types of arbitration. One is ad hoc arbitration, which basically is not administered by any institution, and therefore the parties are required to determine all the aspects of the arbitration, like the number of arbitrators, manner of their appointment, etc. Provided the parties approach the arbitration in the spirit of cooperation, ad hoc proceedings can be more flexible, cheaper and faster than an administered proceeding. The advantage is that it is agreed to and arranged by the party themselves. However, the ground realities show that arbitration in India, particularly ad hoc arbitration, is becoming quite expensive vis-a-vis traditional litigation. Then there is institutional arbitration, which is a specialized institution with a permanent character, and it intervenes and assumes the functions of aiding and administering the arbitral processes. This has to work according to the rules of that institution. It is important to note that these institutions do not arbitrate the dispute. It is the arbitrators who arbitrate, and so the term arbitration institution is inapt, and also it rules the institution applies. It's not that some other rules will apply, the institutional rules will apply. Incorporation of a book of rules or the arbitration agreement is one of the principal advantages of institutional arbitration. Institutional arbitration throughout the world is recognized as the primary mode of resolution and international commercial disputes. It is an arbitration administered by the arbitral institution, further in many arbitration institutions. This works well before the award is finalized and passed. An experienced panel has to scrutinize it, and as a result, the possibilities of the court setting aside the award is minimal. So if you are more If you're more competent in passing the award, there will be less need for the involvement of normal courts, and normal litigation will also reduce, and the arbitration would actually serve a better purpose. Now then there is statutory arbitration. Now what statutory arbitration means is when a law specifies that if a dispute arises in a particular case, it has to be referred to arbitration. The arbitration proceedings are called statutory arbitration, and it is covered under section 2(4) of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 1996. They provide, with exception to section 41 and section 41 and section 43, that provisions for part 1 shall apply to every arbitration under any other act for the time being in force in India. Then of course there is the fast track arbitration. It is a time bound sort of an arbitration, and you cannot cover everything since stricter rules of procedure apply. They do not allow for any laxity or for extensions of time. With extension of time, I believe that there is more resultant delays. Therefore, it is better that there is a time bound and a fast track arbitration, which reduces the span of time and the cost that is being spent on litigation or other types of arbitration. Section 11(2), 13(2) of the 1996 Act provide that the parties are free to agree on a procedure for appointing an arbitrator. They can choose the fastest way to challenge an arbitral award respectively. The Indian Council of Arbitration, or the ICA, has pioneered the concept of fast track arbitration in India, and under its rules and parties may request an arbitral tribunal to settle disputes within a fixed time frame. Then of course there is mediation, and mediation is basically a process where there is a mediator or an external person who is neutral to the dispute, and he works with the parties in order to find a solution which is basically acceptable to all the parties involved. The basic motive of mediation is to provide the parties with an opportunity to negotiate, converse and explore options aided by a neutral third party. So it has to be something that everybody agrees upon. This also exhaustively determines if a settlement is possible or not. Mediation is a negotiation carried out with the assistance of third party. The mediator, in contrast to the arbitrator or judge, has no power to impose. Now, like we discussed, in the case of an arbitration, the arbitrator decides what the arbitral award should be. But in the case of mediation, a mediator cannot decide in this manner. They have to come to an amicable settlement. It cannot be a settlement in which one party is satisfied and the other party is dissatisfied. In a mediation, there has to be a comprehensive thing. Everyone has to be satisfied, and they have to leave in a manner in which everyone has gotten what they want from the mediation. Otherwise, the mediation fails. Now, despite the lack of teeth in the mediation process, the involvement of a mediator alters the dynamics of negotiation. The concept of mediation is not foreign to Indian legal system, as there existed different aspects of mediation. The village panchayats and Nyay panchayats are good examples for this. A brief perusal of the laws pertaining to mediation highlights that it has been largely confined to commercial transactions. Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 1996 is framed in such a manner that it is concerned mainly with commercial transactions that involve the common man rather than the common man's interest. In India, mediation has not yet been made popular because we believe in taking people to the court very easily. One of the reasons for this is that mediation is not very popular. It's not a formal proceeding. That is also a main reason. And then of course it cannot be enforced by law. Therefore that is also a very it's a driving force why mediation is not preferred and other forms of alternate dispute resolution are. Now let's move to conciliation. Now conciliation is basically a process in which a neutral person meets with the parties to a dispute which might be resolved. a relatively unstructured method for dispute resolution, I believe. But in this, a third party basically facilitates communication between two parties in an attempt to help them settle their differences. Um, this is basically an attempt. This is also not a solution, a permanent solution. This consists of an attempt by a third party designated by the litigants, like both the parties, similar to arbitration, decide who will conciliate. They reconcile them either before they resort to litigation, which is the court or arbitration, or after this. The attempt to conciliate is generally based on showing each side of the contrary aspects of the dispute that the parties have brought before the conciliator. Section 61 of the 1996 Act provides for conciliation of disputes arising out of a legal relationship, whether contractual or not, and to all proceedings relating thereto. After its enactment, there can be no objection for permitting the parties to enter into a conciliation agreement regarding the settlement of future disputes. There is a subtle difference between mediation and conciliation. They are all very, very similar, but there is a small difference. Like in mediation, the third party is a neutral intermediary, and he's a mediator, and he plays more active role by giving independent compromise formulas to the parties after hearing both the parties. In conciliation, however, the neutral intermediary's role is to bring the parties together in a frame of mind to forget one's animosities and be prepared for an acceptable compromise on terms midway between the stands taken before the commencement of the conciliation proceedings. Then, of course, we discussed earlier that there is negotiation. Now, negotiation is basically a communication for the purpose of persuasion. It is a preeminent mode of dispute resolution, and compared to the processes used by the mutual third parties, it has the advantage of allowing the parties themselves to control the process and the solution. Now, there are certain things that are very, very necessary in order to have a successful negotiation. One has to realize that these are communication processes, so one has to communicate, of course. Then it also resolves conflicts. It is important. Thirdly, it is important that it has to be a voluntary exercise. No one should force anyone into any sort of negotiation. However, that is a free choice, and one can choose to voluntarily go into this sort of a dispute resolution, but one has to realize that it is a non-binding exercise and a non-binding process basically. Apart from that, parties obviously retain control to the outcome and the procedure. Now, there is a possibility of achieving wide-ranging solutions and maximizing joint gains when it comes to negotiation. But in India, negotiation has no statutory realizations or recognitions, such as the case with mediation, and even for that matter, conciliation to some extent. Negotiation is basically what you would call counseling between two parties to resolve their dispute, and there has to be a lot of communication, so that is how that works. It has no set pattern of rules. One doesn't have any rules for negotiation, but even so, one doesn't have to follow a set of rules, because when it comes to negotiation, there is a particular set of rules that has been followed in the past, and depending upon the rules that have been followed in the past, new rules are followed, and similar pattern is followed to conduct further negotiations. Then, of course, a lot of us, especially law students and lawyers, are very, very well versed with the concept of lok adalats. Now, lok adalats, I'd like to say, were the historic necessity in this country, especially because there was a lot of illiteracy at a certain point of time. It was basically introduced in 1982, as I mentioned, but there was a need for some sort of an evolution. Now, the evolution of this movement was a part of the strategy to relieve heavy burden on the courts which had so many pending cases. There are still a lot of pending cases, and it was basically a conglomeration of concepts of social justice, speedy justice, and conciliated result and negotiating efforts. So it is, like you would call it, is a mixture, and it's an amalgamation of everything at once. You talk about social justice and speedy justice and conciliation and negotiation, all of it comes together and forms Lok Adalats. Now they basically cater the needs of the weaker section of the society, and it is an alternative mechanism to resolve disputes in place of litigation, because not everyone can afford litigation, not everyone can afford justice in that form. Therefore it is easier and it is more convenient for the weaker sections of the society to settle disputes by Lok Adalat. They have assumed statutory recognition under the Legal Services Authorities Act of 1987. They are being regularized, and they primarily are aided by the state legal aid and advice boards with the help of district legal aid and advice committees. Now let me briefly tell you about dispute review boards, because a lot of us haven't heard about these as a part of alternate dispute resolution. So this is very, very important. The primary function of dispute review boards is basically to assist the parties to a construction of a contract which avoids disputes by facilitating and improving communication, and it also encourages the resolution of contentious issues by the parties at the job level before they can actually become proper disputes. And if the issue cannot be resolved at a job level, it assists the contracting parties to resolve disputes quickly and cost effectively without the need of arbitration or litigation. Now they can formally or informally assist the parties, if they so require, to resolve any disagreements which arise during the course of the contract works. The members can make recommendations or decisions regarding issues and the disputes referred to them by any of the contracting parties. The primary advantage of dispute review board, as opposed to an ad hoc appointment of an arbitrator or an adjudicator, is that whenever a dispute arises, the members of the DRB or the dispute review board will have a high degree of knowledge and familiarity with the project, easier in that regard. Its contractual context is also more easier for the parties involved to understand. Its progress, which basically enables the dispute review board to assist the parties informally by providing them recommendations, you could say, or if required they can give a decision within a relatively shorter period of time as opposed to arbitration or litigation. Therefore this is actually a simpler, I would say simplest form of alternate dispute resolution. Now dispute adjudication board and dispute review board are interconnected. So DAB and DRB are widely used as ADR mechanisms in construction disputes. Now this is on a larger scale but a simpler way of resolving disputes. Now a standing panel consists of 3 to 5 members, and it will be constituted obviously to resolve the dispute. The only difference that is between the DAB and the DRB is basically that it is not binding upon the parties, and the DRB's decision won't bind, and I think DAB's would. The members basically of the panel must have expertise on the subject matter. Of course, like I said, it cannot happen on a longer duration of time. It has to be decided in a shorter frame of time. Therefore it's important that not a lot of stress has to be put on the arbitrators, and the people should have, the panel basically should have the knowledge of the construction dispute completely and fully. Now I will briefly mention what usually happens in the USA, which is obviously completely different from the common law countries. But in the USA, the DAB and DRB are basically used in tunnel projects. So they use it for tunnel projects, for railways, for highways, and building and process contracts, and there are a lot of people who are involved in it. Now, some institutions have included DAB and DRB, and they have a monetary clause in their standard form of agreement. Whenever they have any sort of construction, they have a standard model form that they use in any construction agreement whatsoever. Now, there was a Chartered Institute for Arbitrators who have formed the Disputes Board rules for providing DAB and DRB services to the disputants. Interestingly enough, my father, he's the first lawyer in the country to have been done dispute review boards, and the third in the world in 1994. However, as we discussed that in 1996 the act came into being, so I feel very blessed and fortunate, and his name also entered in the Limca Book of Records. So I feel very, very fortunate that I am related to a celebrity in the legal profession at least. Then I will talk about the Legal Services Authority Act, which came in 1987. It was brought into force on November 19th, 1995. The object of this act was to provide free and competent legal services to the weaker section of the society, to ensure that opportunities for securing justice are not denied to anyone. Like I said earlier, that a lot of people do not resort to litigation only because they can't afford it, and therefore they don't get any justice. And in order to get justice, Lok Adalats and such legal services aids are actually helping them a lot, and the weaker sections of the society can obviously resort to any of those methods and resolve their disputes. Now, of course, there were settlements which were affected by conducting Lok Nyayalayas, and we needed a proper act, and after the coming of the act it became a little easier. Now, there was a landmark judgment which came from the Honorable Delhi High Court, and the name of the judgment is basically Abdul Hassan and National Legal Services Authority versus Delhi Vidyut Board and others. Now, I'm just going to read out the judgment so that never mind, you can look it up. The court had passed, okay, I'll just give you what the brief was, that the court had passed the order giving directions for setting up of permanent Lok Adalats so that justice was more accessible to the weaker sections of the society. This is basically the crux of the judgment. You can obviously read the whole judgment on Manupatra or SCC. It is available. It was a reported judgment. Now I'm going to talk about improving mechanisms in ADR and not just the arbitration. The evolution of ADR mechanisms was not that much of a success, like I just said. There is a trend in the imposition of responsibility and duty of the court. The courts are authorized to give directions for adoptions of ADR mechanisms by the parties, and for that purpose court has to play an important role by giving way to the guidance. Power is also conferred upon the courts in order to intervene in different stages of the proceedings of any sort of ADR proceedings. These goals cannot be achieved unless requisite infrastructure is provided and institutional framework has been put to place. Now, there has to be 3 stages where this institutional framework has to come into being. One of which is obviously awareness. It can be brought about by holding seminars or webinars nowadays. There should be workshops. There has to be like ADR literacy programs where people who are not from the law background and are laymen should know as to what their rights are, what they can look for, and if they don't have money to go into litigation, they can come into alternate forms of dispute resolution. Then, of course, there has to be acceptance. Now, in regard of ADR, practitioners should be made, they should have some sort of a degree. Now, mediators are getting certified. Earlier, that wasn't the case. So, that has actually helped a lot of the people, because mediators are trained in the art of mediating, and there are facilitators who train them. There are conciliators who are getting trained. So training is very, very important, and there has to be an acceptance for training. Of course, there has to be an implementation for alternate dispute resolution. That could include that judicial officers should actually be able to assess and inform the litigants as to what cases can be sorted out through ADR mechanisms. It doesn't have to be all litigation or all arbitration. There are other forms and other means such as conciliation, mediation, and so on and so forth, lok adalats, that one can rely upon and one can use in order to get justice in the easier form. Now, there is obviously a need for making the ADR mechanisms more viable. Now that has to be that has to concern with an inflow of the cases which need to be stopped, because there is so much litigation which is pending. There is so much cases that just go on for years, and that really leads to people getting a later date, and people always try to, they want to settle their disputes, but that doesn't happen because the courts don't have the time. Courts have to deal with so much litigation, and people don't have enough knowledge about alternate forms of dispute resolution. Therefore, I feel that there is a need for making the ADR mechanisms more viable, and it should educate further. There is also a very important need to set up mediation centers, because if there is no place to mediate, where would a person mediate? So that is very important, I believe. Now, of course, there are people who can't afford litigation, and because of this, a lot of rural people are cynical about judicial process. Now, this sort of thing should go into villages so that people have more sort of an access to justice, and so they can actually resolve their disputes in a better manner. There is also a need for ADR centers which need to be constructed. I feel that there is a very huge shortage. Also, I feel that the main problem with the ADR is that the major lacuna, I would say, is that they're not binding, right? A lot of the processes of ADR are not binding, apart from arbitration, like lok adalats, not that but lok adalats do allow you that they give you that sort of a decision in which you can obviously challenge it further and everything. But then again, I feel that there is a need for more arbitration centers, more ADR centers, and more education and awareness. Now, let us talk briefly about the Consumer Protection Act of 1986. Now, the preamble of this act basically declares that it was enacted to protect the interest of the consumers from exploitation and to present the consumer complaints in an appropriate consumer court, so that the objective of the act is achieved and the justice is done to the consumers. So I'll just read out what it actually said. It said that the importance of the act lies in promoting welfare of the society by enabling the consumer to participate directly in the market economy. It attempts to remove the helplessness of a consumer which he faces against powerful businesses, described as a network of rackets, or a society which the producers have secured power to rob the rest, and the might of public bodies which are degenerating into the storehouses of inaction, where papers do not move from one desk to another as a matter of duty and responsibility, but for extraneous consideration, leaving the common man helpless, bewildered, and shocked. On the other hand, arbitration as an alternate dispute resolution has become quite popular, and it has been on boom for such large corporations as well as private individual parties. Now, the reason for such a change in trend has been its fast mechanism of the redressal of disputes, which has major concern for judiciary as long as the pending cases in the court have been a concern for the disputing parties. Now, according to Section 7 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 1996, arbitration agreement means an agreement by which the parties submit to arbitration. This can mean any and all disputes which may or may not arise between them, in respect of a defined legal relationship, whether it is contractual or not. Now there was a judgment which was A. Ayasami versus A. Parmasivam, in which Justice D.Y. Chandrachud had held that certain category of disputes as a public of policy are assigned to public fora, and those are excluded from the public fora, and authoritatively opined that forum will not be barred to entertain complaint under the Consumer Act, and had observed as what I'm going to read now. In addition to various classes of disputes which are generally considered by the courts as appropriate for decision by the public fora, there are classes of disputes which fall within the exclusive domain of special fora under the legislation, which confers exclusive jurisdiction to the exclusion of any ordinary civil court. That such disputes are not arbitrable dovetails with general principle that a dispute which is capable of adjudication by an ordinary civil court is also capable of being resolved by arbitration. However, if the jurisdiction of an ordinary civil court is excluded by the conferment of exclusive jurisdiction on a specified court or a tribunal as a matter of public policy, such a dispute would not be then capable of resolution by the arbitration. So this is the judgment that I just read. The arbitrary nature of the consumer dispute will nullify the main object of the Act, as consumer will have to fight for its right in arbitration, which is pro-corporate and ends the remaining of the formation to the Consumer Redressal Commissions. From the preamble of the CPA 1986 or the Consumer Protection Act, it is apparent that the main objective of the Act is to protect the rights and interests of the consumer by providing mechanism through which cheaper, expeditious, easier and effective redressal is made available to the consumers. Now, Supreme Court had held and observed that the preamble of the Act declares that it is an act to provide better protection for the interests of consumers, and for that purpose to make provisions of the establishment of consumer councils and other authorities for the settlement of consumer disputes and matters connected therewith. The Supreme Court of India in Fair Engineers Private Limited and another versus N.K. Modi, while holding that a consumer forum were judicial authority, inter alia observed that it is seen that in section 3 envisages the provisions of the Act are in addition to and are not in derogation of any other law in force. It is true, as rightly contended by so and so, that the words in derogation of the provisions of any other law for the time being in force would be given a proper meaning and effect if the complaint is not stayed and the parties are not relegated to the arbitration. The Act purports to the operation in derogation of the provisions of the Arbitration Act. Prima facie, the contention appears to be plausible, but on the construction and conspectus of the provisions of the Act, we think that the contention is not well founded. Parliament is aware of the provisions of the Arbitration Act and the Contract Act of 1872. The consequential remedy available under section 9 of the Civil Procedure Code, that is to avail the right of civil action in a competent court of civil jurisdiction. Nonetheless, the Act provides for an additional remedy. It also means that any dispute between private parties can be adjudicated by arbitration as per the choice of the parties, as long as the disputes are not barred by any sort of legislation. The Supreme Court of India, in the case of Booz Allen and Hamilton Inc. versus SBI Home Finance Limited, explained the conceptual framework of what kinds of disputes are arbitrable and what aren't. The Supreme Court in Aftab Singh Supra further held that the Consumer Act was envisaged as a special social legislation. It basically protected the consumer rights. Unlike other legislations that create dispute resolution mechanism between level players, this legislation established a level playing field between the unequal players, that is, the corporations and the consumers. Of course, there are other judgments from the NCDRC, and there are judgments from the Supreme Court that can be relied upon here. There is one from NCDRC that I will mention. It is Aftab Singh versus MRMGF. Of course, we all know that MRMGF is a huge corporation, and so on and so forth. There were many other many other sorts of judgments that came into being. I'm sorry, I got distracted for a minute there. But there are a lot of judgments that the NCDRC, Supreme Court, other courts and high courts have come into play, and it has been very, very important to understand those. Now, I'll just conclude very quickly, and I would just like to say this, that with the advent of alternate dispute resolution, there is a new avenue for the people to settle their disputes, and there are so many ways that you can settle your disputes, and it is very, very easy. But of course, Lok Adalats have acquired a lot of popularity very, very quickly. However, the other forms of ADR, such as mediation, conciliation and negotiation, people don't know much about. So what I feel is that there is an urgent need to educate and raise awareness about other avenues, and this will lead to justice dispensation through ADR mechanisms, right? The ADR movement needs to be carried forward with greater speed, and this will considerably reduce the load on the courts, apart from providing instant justice at the doorstep without substantial cost being involved. If they are successfully given effect, then it will really achieve the goal of rendering social justice to the parties who actually face the disputes. So by this I conclude my webinar. You can ask me questions. I see a few questions. I'm just going to start answering. So I just have a question from Nikita Thapar. She asks, can a property dispute be better resolved by reference to Lok Adalat or mediation? No, I think that a property dispute with Lok Adalat, yes, but I feel that arbitration would work better. But of course, arbitration is also very, very time consuming. Therefore, I feel that Lok Adalat is the way to go. Mediation, not so much, because it is not binding. I also have a question from Stanislaus. Okay, their question is, what are the qualifications of an arbitration? I think he means arbitrator, so I'm going to answer accordingly. So basically, an arbitrator could be anyone who's well versed in the field of law. An arbitrator could be a senior advocate. An arbitrator could be a retired judge. An arbitrator, depending upon the gravity of the dispute, could be a lawyer who's well versed with the situation. But of course, it has to be when both the parties decide to make him the arbitrator. So that is a very, very important thing that one must keep in mind. So an arbitrator can be anybody who you think is educated enough to settle a dispute. Then of course, there is a question by Govind. Yeah, so I just answered this, that I feel, okay, yes, I answered this question just now. I feel that Lok Adalats can obviously give a better, they can resolve the dispute in a better form, I feel. But I don't think that that is the case with mediation, since mediation is not legally binding. They can only give you a recommendation, but at the end of the day, it is important that it be settled by someone who can actually have a binding effect. Now Gaurav asks, can you please elaborate on the cases that you've appeared assisted before the ICJ? Gaurav, I have appeared in various cases. If we start talking about those, another hour will go by. But yes, I can briefly tell you. Some were environmental matters in which I have appeared. Of course, there is the PCA, in which I have done a lot of arbitration as well. So yeah, you're free to come and watch me sometime once this resumes. So I have about 20 seconds remaining in this. So I have 20 seconds remaining, and therefore I will wrap it up. Thank you so much for having me, the virtual lawyer, and I hope that your venture to continue to educate people goes well.